this, I wanted to take a moment and share with you that we have a number of people that I send this class recording out to. My mom, Charles and Betty Benefield, my daughter, Brittany, Angela, my sister, Jeff Bennett, her cousin's husband, my brother who's in Nathan, who's in Saudi Arabia, my older brother Nolan, who's in Seneca, my son Tyler, down on the coast, Julie, Nathan's wife, who's in Alabama, Enterprise, Pam Vault, Cheryl Malone. Cheryl Malone was our receptionist at the seminary until of late, where she's had some health issues that's kind of confined her to being at home. And then just added this week, Wayne and Charlotte Robertson. I don't know if you knew Wayne or not. Wayne worked in the chaplains commissions for a number of years. He's retired Air Force. And then Caleb Peacock, our CFO at the seminary. And so there are a number of people that hear what we do in this class, and they really enjoy the conversation. They enjoy the comments and your input. And so I'm not a camera bug. The only reason I am because it's ministering, it's doing something to someone, to bless someone. And I get comments and responses and how much they appreciate. I know Charles and Betty are faithful to watch it as soon as I post it. And then the others watch it quite quickly. But anyway, if there's any of the teaching that you may see here, it's on YouTube. And so you can go there and get it and revisit something or whatever, or send it to somebody if you'd like. But the prayers, this is a praying class this morning. We all, if you saw your phone, Karen's not here, had put in a prayer request, and quickly everybody's responded, most everybody, to Karen and praying for her. And then, and I appreciate that so much. I appreciate your responses. And so as we progress as a class, I would like for you to keep in mind that sometimes there are others who may come to your mind that you want to pray for, may have needs, and sometimes to let you know moving forward, I may even ask you to pray for somebody that's not in the class here. But anyway, we want them to feel like they're a part, and so I just wanted to take time to mention them today before we got into this part here. Trying to finish up, and now moving toward this video on YouTube. It's the history of Old City Jerusalem, its walls, its gates, and key sites, historical tour of all periods, and then Israel. And then you see the Bible teacher there, Pastor Dr. Todd M. Fink. And so this has got some good outlines about the walls that we'll see. Hopefully the volume will be enough where you can see it, but you can find it on YouTube. It's not my work. Disclaimer, this is not my work. This is on YouTube. This is somebody else's work. And so I'd like to hit this, and we'll play it as far as we can get it to go here.
Welcome to the Holy Land in this site of the walls of Jerusalem. So in this video, we're going to be taking you all around the walls of Jerusalem, the current walls, but we're also going to take you back in time, and we're going to show you the history of how the walls were during the times of the Canaanites, David, Solomon, after Solomon, Hezekiah, Nehemiah, the walls during the time of Christ, and then the walls after the time of Christ, and then how they are today, along with the gates. So I think you'll find this video very enlightening to show you what the walls were like all throughout the history. Also, as a special treat, during the second half of the video, we'll be looking at the current walls and gates of Old City Jerusalem. So follow along and enjoy this video of the walls of Jerusalem. Now the first walls of Jerusalem were built by the Canaanites some 5,000 years ago. So long before the Israelites entered the promised land, the Jebusites lived securely within the walls of Jerusalem. The city was blessed with natural valleys around it that made it easy to defend. The city walls and its fortress provided additional protection. The long history of Jerusalem began well before it was captured by King David and made into the capital of the people of Israel some 3,000 years ago. Archaeological findings indicate the existence of a settlement in Jerusalem in the 3rd millennium or 3,000 years before Christ. The first mention of the city in historical sources begins in the 2nd millennium BC, or once again 2,000 years before Christ. The location of the ancient Canaanite city of Jerusalem was chosen specifically for its natural protective qualities. The hill on which early Jerusalem was built has natural fortifications from 3 directions. The deep Kidron Valley from the east, or also known as the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and then to the west was the Hinnom Valley, also known as the Teropian Valley. And the lowland where the 2 valleys met to the south is down in the place located south of the city of Jerusalem, down in a deep valley which goes down to the Dead Sea. The only side that isn't naturally protected is the north, and this has been a problem that has accompanied ancient Jerusalem throughout its history, and is even mentioned in biblical passages, such as the words of Jeremiah, "And from the north shall come the evil," Jeremiah 1:14. During the time of the Israel conquest, initially the city of Jerusalem was captured, but not fully. And then when David came on the scene in about 1000 BC, then it was he who was able to conquer the city and enlarge it. God was with David and allowed him to capture Jerusalem from the Jebusites. Later, he built additional walls to fortify the city. The Gihon Spring was outside the city at this time, and the city became known as the City of David. Jerusalem's ancient water source was and always has been the Gihon Spring on the east side of the City of David in the valley of Jehoshaphat, or the Kidron Valley. In 2 Samuel 5:6, God tells us about how David captured the city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who said to David, "You will not come up here, but the blind and the lame will ward you off," thinking, David cannot come in here. So they were mocking David and said, "You will never take this city." Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is, the city of David. And David said on that day, "Whoever would strike the Jebusites, let him give up the water shaft to attack the lame and the blind, who are hated by David's soul. Therefore it is said, the blind and the lame shall not come into this house." And David lived in the stronghold and called it the City of David. And David built the city all around from the Milo inward. And David became greater and greater, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. So in this passage we see here that the Jebusites are mocking David, and then David comes up through the water shaft of the Gihon Spring and captures the city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites from within the city, coming up from underneath of the city. Right here is where it all began, my dear friends. This is where God's plan to establish the temple and his speaking to the people and residing in this special place of Jerusalem about 3,000 years ago. And it will be the place where Christ is going to reign during the millennial reign. And this is the place where the prophets and the priests have ministered from. But it all began in the City of David. Now you can see the southern stairs here, and you can see the Temple Mount platform. The City of David ran from just below, or even connecting to the southern stairs there, running down along the ridge, down to the Hinnom Valley, and where the Kidron Valley meet. In fact, down at the tip down there is where the Pool of Siloam is, and that would be the lower part of the city of David. You can see right here, there's this wall here, this ancient wall. It's believed that that's what Nehemiah fortified. There's a kind of a tower there. That's where a watch place was, a lookout was. So this is the city of David, and this is what David...
That's why I burned all my shoes,
Oh,
and you
my
should too. Let me explain.
Sorry, folks.
All my
They got those ads. I don't pay the subscription. Anyway, if you need something for your foot, there it is.
about 3,000 years ago. Then after the time of David, then Solomon comes on the scene, and he adds to the walls of the city of Jerusalem. So David dies, and then Solomon built a temple on the threshing floor of Aruna, or Ornan, and he enlarged the Temple Mount platform and added walls from the city of David to the Temple Mount. So he enlarged, he built this temple platform, he built the temple, which was glorious, and then he enlarged the city walls so that it would encompass the city of David and the platform, the Temple Mount, where the new temple was that he had built. Around 700 BC, then Hezekiah enlarged the city of Jerusalem in a big way. What was happening was that the northern 10 tribes of Israel, the northern part of Israel, was falling to the Assyrians, as had been prophesied by God. He had sent them prophet after prophet after prophet, warning them, but they did not listen. So God fulfilled his word, the prophecies, and the Assyrians moved in and took over the north. As they were doing that, many people fled from the north and sought refuge in Jerusalem. And so they settled in what is called the western side of the city of Jerusalem. So when the Assyrians were getting closer and threatening to take Jerusalem and the southern part of the nation of Israel, which was called Judah, then Hezekiah went into a massive, quick, frenzied building program, and he built what was called Hezekiah's Broad Wall. It's named that because of how wide it is. It was built quick, and it encompassed the whole western side of the city of David and Jerusalem. So there was a massive expansion then under King Hezekiah. In 2 Chronicles 32:5, it says about Hezekiah, he set to work resolutely and built up the wall that was broken down. So he repaired what did exist and raised towers upon it. And outside it, he built another wall. So this is the expansion, talking about the expansion. And he strengthened the Milo in the city of David. He also made weapons and shields in abundance. So Hezekiah's new wall measured 22 feet wide, or about 7 meters wide, by about 25 feet high, or 8 meters high. It was a massive undertaking and measured around 2.5 miles in length, or about 4 kilometers. A portion of the wall was discovered in the 1970s by Israeli archaeologist Naaman Abigad and dated to the reign of King Hezekiah, which was about 716 to 687 BC. It was called Hezekiah's Broad Wall by archaeologists because of its width. Hezekiah also built a water tunnel in order to keep the water from the Gihon spring inside the city walls so the Assyrians couldn't cut off the water supply. The curving tunnel is 583 yards, or about 533 meters long, and has a fall of exactly 12 inches, or 30 centimeters, between its two ends, the beginning and the lower part, which winds up down at the Pool of Siloam. It was chiseled from both ends to the middle at the same time, and it took the water from the Gihon spring under the mountain to the Pool of Siloam below the city. Later, then Nehemiah rebuilt the city walls of Jerusalem. So when the Babylonians conquered and destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BC, they also destroyed the walls and burned the gates with fire. However, God sovereignly moved in the heart of Artaxerxes the king of Persia, to allow Nehemiah to rebuild the walls later on. It says in Nehemiah 1, "Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah." So Nehemiah was in Babylon, and his brothers came to him and reported the news of what was happening in Jerusalem. And they said, "The remnant there in the province who survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire." So Nehemiah rebuilds this wall, and it was a massive, amazing miracle. It says in Nehemiah 6:15, "So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem. For they perceived that this work had been accomplished by the help of our Lord." Nehemiah didn't change the existing walls of Hezekiah, but just repaired those that existed. Some 275 years after Nehemiah, there was a Hasmonean wall addition. The Jews gained their independence from the Seleucid Empire in around 167 BC, and they gained it under the Maccabees and the Hasmoneans. At this time, Jerusalem began to be rebuilt along with its walls. During this period, a wall was added to the northern part of the existing wall. It would be this city layout that would exist during the time of Christ. In 63 BC, the Romans conquered the Jews and made several major changes in Jerusalem. Herod the Great enlarged the Temple Mount to its current size. The Antonia Fortress was also built that was beside the Temple Mount for protection purposes. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is the believed place where Christ was crucified, buried, and rose again, was located outside the city walls at this time. From 37 to 70 AD, the walls of Jerusalem swelled to the north. So Herod Agrippa I laid the foundation for an expansion of the walls of Jerusalem to the north. Agrippa I began the construction of an additional wall of the city, which was completed at the beginning of the First Jewish-Roman War in 66 AD. This would be the largest area the city walls would ever encompass in Jerusalem's history. In 70 AD, the Jews revolted against the Romans, and the city and the temple were burned and leveled. This fulfilled Christ's prophecy regarding the destruction of Jerusalem because of the Jews' rejection of Christ as their Messiah. Later, in around 132 AD, the Jews revolted again against the Romans. Hadrian, the Roman emperor, ordered the city to be totally destroyed and renamed. It was then called Aelia Capitolina, and Israel was renamed to Palestine, which comes from the word Philistines. This was done in an attempt to eradicate any association of Jerusalem and Israel with the Jews. After some 2 centuries without walls, new walls were erected around the city, probably during the reign of Emperor Diocletian, sometime between 289 AD and the turn of the century. The walls were then extensively renewed later on by the Empress Aelia Eudocia during her banishment to Jerusalem in around 443 to 460 AD. It should be mentioned, however, that the original walls that existed during the time of Christ were never completely destroyed. Therefore, some of the walls that exist today are from this time period. Newer walls have been built upon them, but parts of the original walls, as mentioned, are from the time of Christ. A good example of this is part of the Western Wall, or also known as the Wailing Wall. The walls of Jerusalem would then be rebuilt and torn down until the time of Suleiman the Magnificent arrived on the scene in the 1500s. The city walls that exist today were built in the 16th century under Suleiman the Magnificent. He decided to rebuild the city walls on much of the remains of the ancient walls that already existed. They were completed in 1538 and are the walls of the city today. And you will notice in these walls that about halfway up, the walls kind of change. The lower part is generally the older part of the walls. And then the new part, or the part that you can see usually with smaller stones and sometimes haphazardly laid, is the newer part. Now the walls of Jerusalem today are glorious and majestic. We'll take a look at each section of the city walls now. We'll start with the western city wall side and then see the northern, eastern, and southern sides of the city walls. Along the way, we'll highlight the city gates and a few outstanding places. In another video, we'll talk about the history and show you in more detail each city gate that exists today, along with a few that existed in the time of Jesus that no longer exist. The western side of the walls of Jerusalem are spectacular in beauty. One notable place along this wall is the believed place where Christ was tried and condemned to crucifixion. Herod's palace was located just inside this wall, and it's believed Pilate was using it when Christ was brought before him. The Jaffa Gate is also on this side of the wall. It's the largest and one of the most used gates of the city. It was built by Suleiman the Magnificent in 1538. It marked the end of the highway that led from Jaffa, or the Jaffa port, on the Mediterranean Ocean to Jerusalem. A large opening in the wall was made right beside the original gate that still exists today. In 1898, when Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany visited Jerusalem, the ruling Ottoman Turks opened it up so the German emperor would not have to dismount his carriage to enter the city. Today, this opening allows cars to enter the old city between Jaffa Gate and the city of David. This gate leads into the Christian and Armenian quarters of the old city. The northern city wall section is the longest and has the most gates. This side of the wall was always the weakest side to protect because the terrain slopes uphill from here. For this reason, most of the battles that were fought took place on this side. It was here that the Romans entered to conquer Jerusalem in 70 AD. The first gate in the section of this wall is the New Gate. It carries this name because it was constructed in 1898 and is the newest gate. It was built with permission of Sultan Abdul Hamid II and is located near the northwestern corner of the city. It leads into the Christian quarter. The next gate is the Damascus Gate. It is one of the busiest and certainly the most magnificent of all Jerusalem's gates. The gate consists of one large center gate originally intended for use by persons of high station or high prominence, and two smaller side entrances for the common people. It's the main entrance into the Muslim quarter of the city today. Just after the Damascus Gate is Zedekiah's Cave, or also known as Solomon's Quarries. This is a massive underground cave that was used for quarrying large limestones used in the walls of Jerusalem. It encompasses 5 acres, or 2.5 hectares, that runs the length of 5 city blocks under the Muslim quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. Next is Herod's Gate. It connects the Muslim quarter inside the old city to a Palestinian neighborhood just inside. It is a short distance to the east of the Damascus Gate. The eastern wall section of the old city is quite majestic and faces the Mount of Olives, which rises up, and the Kidron Valley, which falls below it. The Temple Mount, where the temple was once located, shares part of this side of the wall. The Lion's Gate is located in this section of the wall. The entrance also leads to the famous Via Dolorosa. Near the gate's crest are 4 figures of lions, 2 on the left and 2 on the right. Legend has it that Sultan Suleiman placed the figures there because he believed that if he did not construct a wall around Jerusalem, he would be killed by lions. Israeli paratroopers famously stormed through this gate during the Six-Day War to conquer the Temple Mount, after which they unfurled the Israeli flag above the old city. The Eastern Gate, also known as the Golden Gate, was the main entrance to the original temple during the time of Jesus. Jesus used this gate regularly when he was in Jerusalem to teach on the Temple Mount area. Now, this Eastern Gate has played a significant role in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, and it will play, according to many scholars, an important role in prophesied future events as well. Now, during the time of Christ, there was a bridge that was from here of the Eastern Gate, and it would span over the Kidron Valley and wind up over towards the Mount of Olives. That way people didn't have to go down the Kidron Valley and back up. So right here, right directly under this gate, this is a newer gate, about 500 years old, but right directly under it, it has been found was the original gate. So Christ would have walked right through here on a regular basis, especially the last week of his ministry. He would come back and forth, staying on the Mount of Olives, and then ministering right here on the Temple Mount. So this plays a real key role in the Bible. According to Jewish tradition, the Messiah will enter Jerusalem through this gate when he returns. To prevent this, the Muslims sealed the gate during the rule of Suleiman and built a cemetery by it. Of course, we know that Jesus the Messiah already entered through this gate, and when he returns, no cemetery will stop him from re-entering this gate. The southern wall section of the old city has some significant places along it. The most notable is the southern steps area. This was the main entrance to the Temple Mount during the time of Christ, and it is what connected the city of David to the Temple Mount. Right here, this group of people, can you say hi? They are sitting on the very stairs. They are called the Rabbi Stairs that went up to the Temple Mount during Christ's time. And these are the very stairs upon which Christ would have walked, upon which he would have taught his disciples, and also upon which the Apostle Paul would have learned under Gamaliel, one of the most famous rabbis in Jerusalem and in the Apostle Paul's time. Today, all of the original gates from the southern stairs have been closed off. There was no doubt that Jesus would have used these stairs and taught his disciples here as well. There are also hundreds of mikvahs, which are Jewish purification pools, by these stairs that were used for purification purposes and likely used as well at Pentecost for the 3,000 that were saved and then got baptized. The Dung Gate is located along this section of the wall and is the closest in proximity to the Western Wall or the Wailing Wall, which is in the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. The gate received its name because refuse or trash was hauled out of the city through this gate. Just up from the Dung Gate is the Zion Gate. It was one of the main gates used by the Israeli Defense Forces in 1967 to enter and capture the old city. The stones surrounding the gate are still marked by weapons of fire, and you can see the holes and all these damaged parts in this gate area. Now, what can we learn as a faith lesson from the history of Jerusalem and its walls and gates?
I'll stop it right there. If we can capture the, get the lights again. I thought that was quite interesting, the way that they had the graphics and stuff, and so I hope you enjoyed that. He goes into a lesson plan with them, which is good, but you can go on to YouTube, look that up yourself if you like. And so anyway, that's what I kind of wanted to finish up with in the class. I hope you enjoyed it.
Can you
explain to me again, because it went a little bit too fast for this brain. The Romans named it Palestine to stop the Jews from associating with it. When did that happen? And
I'd have to go back to what he had the history of. In fact, I know, you can go in here to, let's see here, let's go back over there.
It was the second revolution that the Jews had against the Romans. It's when a lot of those Jews went to the Mount, what, Masada?
Everybody.
Masada, yeah. The Dead Sea and find that place and
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
that they would never, that was, I think it was in the 300s.
yeah,
So after Christ is when that happened.
yeah, they had that mass suicide
Well, what they,
when the Romans finally
they
built
thought
it.
that they couldn't, they could never get to them, and they couldn't have except that they started using Jewish people to build a ramp up
Yeah.
that wall.
Yeah,
And so they could have killed them from the top, but they didn't want to kill the Jewish people, so that eventually,
but they told the name, they named it Palestine, and it was a derivative of some group of people. And I-
Philistines.
Okay, so they altered the name Philistine and called it Palestine.
yeah.
Okay, that's
You
what got
can
passed.
go to that video, Ron, and, if you want to, anybody else for that matter. And it's got a place where you can click to enlarge what has been, like a transcript. And so you can go down through here and see other things that is embedded in this, and so you can show the transcript, and you can pick up all those details. Let's see, yeah, right over here, there's a lot of these details that will come into play.
I believe a lot of what he was talking about is he derived that from Josephus' writings.
I think so, yes.
He was very good, very thorough, packed with,
Yeah, it was, it was good.
man.
I have to say, of all the things that he brought up, the one thing that and you can go and I watched it, Hezekiah's tunnel, or whatever, only a foot drop, and they started to indug that thing.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how in the world they.
I would
it's
love to
still
know that
hard to
myself.
do now. Even today, it's hard to do, to make two tunnels.
I did see where, somebody had talked about, it's called sounding, where you would use echoes and the sounds to help, but when you're starting way, how did they stay,
500 yards,
how did they do that? I
to
don't
hit that
know.
with 30 inches of fall is precision on a scale that
Yeah.
God gifted somebody. I still believe God gifts people to do what they do, and God gifted somebody very specially to do that.
Oh, yeah, it is truly amazing how
That's,
how they done that.
that's NASA technical engineering level accuracy.
But you can, there now, of course, did you go through Hezekiah's tunnel when you were there?
I went down to it. I did not take a picture of it. I've got several pictures of that. If the class would be interested, I'll bring them, let you look at them. I've got a picture of myself in the dungeon cell that they think Christ was held in
Hmm,
the day before his crucifixion.
wow.
It just dropped you down in the hole.
Can you put it on a format like that where you can?
I do have that on a format, but it's so old, it probably wouldn't operate today. I'll see if I can find it.
That'd be good.
It's on a floppy disk.
It's probably on a floppy disk. Or it's either on that or one of those old cassette
Mm-hmm.
cartridges.
Yeah.
When did you go there?
2007, 8.
It's not all that long ago.
That That was the first trip he took after his wreck. And his wreck was in 2006. So it had to be in either 2007, 2008.
18 years ago oh,
He's changed a lot, because I was there in 63. I mean, it's modernized.
I was there in 63, in the summer, in May of 63. I think I saw you.
Daddy took a group over. Mother didn't want to go. That was 70, early 70s. Mother didn't want to go, so I got the joys of being the ladies' person on the trip, and it has definitely changed. I don't have Nick probably has a desire to go back. I don't.
I don't know that I'd want to go back.
It was so devastating to see
But
kids with guns strapped across their bodies, because you never knew whenever, and then go to bed at night, the bombing. Maybe the Lord will let me see it after he returns.
there was a lot of gunfire there while we
Oh,
was
yeah,
there.
it's,
Just, the Muslims, Ramadan?
Ramadan.
Ramadan.
That's their Jewish holiday. We were there during that, and they are mean, especially during that period of time.
Well, they fast, that'd make anybody mean.
It's a day of fasting. And, me and Hugh Carter were walking down the street, and somebody threw a firecracker right at us. And I was on this side, he was on this side, and it exploded right here where he was. They warned us, to be careful that day.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And so,
Those, a lot of memories brought back, those steps that they're set on, I've sat on those steps. That's for Christ entered the temple. And that is original.
yeah.
The Via Dolorosa is still original, is it not?
Well, they say it is, I'm not sure it is. There's a place in there, in the wall, where they've got a handprint, they say, of Christ, where he failed. And they encased that and just put it in the wall. Now, they say it's the original, but I don't hardly see how it could be, because everything else is so much lower than that. It was original to him. Now, the route's probably the same route, but I don't know that it's the same street.
Well, let's turn to our prayer request while we got just a few minutes left here.